This podcast is sponsored by Systems Accountants, a specialist global resourcing solutions company focused exclusively on accounting technology and finance transformation.
There are many retired professional rugby players that are involved in businesses today, but only a few are making waves in their respective industries. One such person is former London Irish back row player Ciaran Bird, who is now managing director at the world's largest commercial real estate services and investment firm, CBRE Ltd in the United Kingdom. Ciaran, it's a great honour to speak to you at the Rugby Business Network. Thanks for taking the time.
Sure, good to speak to you.
Ciaran, I want to take you back first to a couple decades ago during the 90s when you were playing for London Irish. For 10 years, you played at the club, while for the last 3 years of your career there it was as a professional. Was it a noticeable transition in 1995 when you went from being a semi-professional player to a full-blown professional?
The one thing I always say to people is do remember this was a transition, and whilst you can use the word professional, it was pretty amateur, and the sport was learning, and so our contracts consisted of a sort of 3 or 4 pieces of paper that you had to sort of sign, and there was no sort of lawyers involved. Sign a piece of paper and just hope that you were what it said was going to sort of back you through a period. But so look, it was a huge transition, and yes, suddenly we were being paid for it, but the actual infrastructure behind a lot of these clubs was pretty thin on the ground, certainly for the first year or so.
Ciaran, often retiring players, they need some assistance when making a move into business after their playing days, as they are perhaps unsure as to what they actually want to do for a living. Although this doesn't seem to be the case for you, as early on in your career as a rugby player, you were already taking up trainee positions at retail agencies. Was this a conscious decision on your part, or did someone suggest to you that you needed to plan for your life after rugby while you were still at the start of your career?
No, and this is a big subject that's still close to my heart. And I've got a 13-year-old son who's coming into rugby, and I'm back down at London Irish, ironically helping out coaching with the minis. But I'm watching a lot of these young lads live their dream, and too many of them are not thinking about life after rugby, or indeed if something was to go wrong, what's the option? Many of them are not even going off to university or even considering about a career out of the sport. But for me, it was very different. I left school at 16 and fell into the world of property. It happened to be retail agency, and so at a very early age, I left with one scenario. I wanted to play rugby and make as much money as I could, and I fell into property. I guess the property bit, the rest is history. But I just worked hard. I managed to get a very good role here in the central of west end of London, and I just worked incredibly hard and was incredibly focused on that journey. Now, of course, at that stage, rugby was amateur, so my parents weren't best pleased when I said I want to play rugby, but. So I worked throughout, and when it was amateur, that was fine. When the sport turned professional, the one thing that I insisted on, that I would still work in the mornings, and so my contract was altered to say that I would work mornings unless there was an agreement in place, and then train in the afternoons, which worked really well for a few years. There were a couple of others. There was a couple of other players doing the same, but it was tough on the rest of the squad and indeed the coach, because if there wanted to be a team run on a Thursday, quite often they were waiting for me and one or two others to do that team run, even if they wanted to do it in the morning. And eventually it got to a stage where I had to make a big decision, because I was then offered a new contract to make sure that I was working, training full time, but I wasn't prepared to do that. So I guess I held out, and I had to make a huge decision at some point. But I was fortunate that I had been in property since 16, so all my rugby playing life, I had this. Others are less fortunate, and if you live in the dream, as I say, I'm now starting at the very early stages to see that with my son. It's very difficult to even consider a working career when you've got the opportunity of playing professional rugby.
Well, when you called time on your professional rugby career in 1998, you had already been working as a retail agent for many years, as you said, from 16 years old. It's clearly evident that you had a passion for the real estate business from an early age. Simple question, why did you find it interesting?
Well, I guess on the basis I fell into it, but I assumed at the time that when I started writing at the age of 16 to all these firms that I wanted to sell and I wanted to make money, and I thought I'd go and sell big houses. I thought that would be a good route. So when I applied to all these real estate firms, I didn't realise that all of them were commercial real estate operators. So when I arrived, I didn't know what I was joining, frankly. But what I realised very quickly, this is an incredible industry, one that too many people are just not aware of. And there is a job in property for absolutely everyone, whether it's construction, whether it's design, whether it's investment, corporate finance, planning, retail, acquiring stores for the best retailers in the world, logistics. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and it's a people business. And I love meeting people. I love getting around. It wasn't stuck behind a desk. I was constantly out visiting properties. And so I got lucky, but I fell into a job that got me out and about and was challenging constantly. So it just suited my skills and the fact that I wanted to be interacting with people. It's a perfect industry for that.
That's absolutely incredible. Well, fast forward to 2017, where you now have 30 years experience in the realty industry. It has been a long road, I'm sure, to get to where you are now as UK Managing Director at CBRE. Have there been any skills or lessons you have taken from your years as a rugby player and applied to business?
I'd say non-stop, actually. And I think the business that we've created or we sort of live by is we have values and behaviours, which is, I guess, the term that is discussed in a corporate world. But for me, in the small business I work for, when I played rugby and when I played in rugby teams, that's all about respect, being humble, looking out for each other and working as a team, and just having structured discipline. And in any great team, you've got all of those. And if you work as an individual, guess what? It doesn't work. If you work as a team, the power of the team is obviously far greater. So I've always had that. I wanted personalities, characters, as opposed to, we want really bright people, but we also want characters, people that are going to make a presence, have a presence when they walk in the room, but think outside the box. But most importantly, recognise that working with their colleagues in a business environment will be to the benefit of all. And that's in many industries, people work in silos. Here at CBRE, in fact, across the globe, but in particular here in the UK, we've instilled that and proven to the people, if you trust and work with each other as a team over a period, you'll see the benefits. So actually, very early on, 4 years ago, when I took over this MD's role, I kind of had a number of workshops type sessions based around values and behaviours, but what we were going to be calling teamship. And I got the terminology teamship actually through Clive Woodward, who was a former London Irish coach of ours, who remains a great friend of mine. And at that time, I said to him, look, Clive, I'm about to take on a role with over 2,000 people. What do you think about bringing in real teamship values that he had created in both that World Cup winning team and indeed the Olympics? And I actually got Clive in to do a few workshops for me, and he helped me on that journey. And it still lives within our business today. People know my and our passion for doing the right thing and working to our teamship values to the benefit of our people and indeed our clients.
Well, for some of our listeners that might not be aware of the sheer magnitude of CBRE, I will inform them that the company has approximately 70,000 employees globally, of which more than 10,000 are based in the United Kingdom, and there are roughly about 400 offices worldwide, if I'm not mistaken. What I would like to know is, do you have any former professional or semi-professional rugby players among those employees? And from your opinion, Ciaran, why do you believe rugby players would make good real estate agents?
Well, a lot of them are very social, they're characters, and they're big team people. So I love meeting potential candidates. I meet them probably too much in many instances because I kind of want to give a bit back. we do have lots of rugby players. We have lots of sports men and women. But a lot of rugby players do incredibly well just because they're characters. They've got big personalities, and I say that the team bit. I guess the real challenge that I find with a lot of the rugby players is that they've got into a way of earning a certain amount of money, and suddenly towards the end of their career, or they may have an injury towards the end of their 20s, early 30s, and they come to us in property and say, look, this is the minimum I need to earn. And I say, you won't make us, or you won't add value to our business for at least 3 to 4 years. And therefore, we can't really afford to pay more than we would pay a graduate or someone starting out. We might pay a bit more because of your maturity and experience, but you've got to look long term, get your head down, prove yourself, train and be ready to add value, in which case you can then, the world is your oyster. You can just move through. And an awful lot of them, and I understand, say I simply can't afford that, and others aren't willing. They want to earn the same amount of money like yesterday. My message to all those guys and girls is very simple, that if you have a passion for property and if you think this could be a long-term career, be prepared to go backwards in your earnings with a view to going forwards. And many have done that, and we're speaking to some professional players that are currently playing the Premiership right this moment. And if they're prepared to put the hard graft in, perhaps go backwards, more likely go backwards on pay, there's potentially a huge career. And as I say, many have done it, and I suspect many will. But it's not as simple as just turning up tomorrow and earning a huge amount of money, because you've got to learn the trade.
Brilliant advice, Ciaran. Well, you've just mentioned team, and rugby is a team sport, as you all know, and having strong teams is also vital when it comes to business. How do you go about building teams and developing people's skills at CBRE?
Well, key to it is management and leadership. We need exceptional managers and leaders. We instill it in our people at every opportunity. If I stand up on a stage or present, I constantly talk about team. People here will hear me talking about it at every opportunity. Whenever we talk about a personal development plan, we talk about how you are going to go on that journey and collaborate with each other. If we share all of our skills and our relationships with all of our colleagues, we will all have far better knowledge base and experience, and which in turn becomes to the benefit of the client. So we have all sorts of workshops, training and development, both one-on-ones, teams as a whole. But it's part of our culture. We just talk about it on a daily basis. Why wouldn't you go to a meeting with a colleague? Why wouldn't you bring 3 or 4 other divisions within when it's to the benefit of the client? And in some instances, you have to share a fee, right? And which means that you as an individual may have brought in a piece of work, but you're going to get a lesser fee because you shared it with other teams within the business. But over a long-term period, all those individuals will reciprocate and come back, and you'll end up doing far greater business as a whole or as a team over a long-term period. And that's a trust bit comes into that. You've got to trust each other, and you've got to trust in their ability and look long-term. Too many people think just about this year and my bonus this year. The minute you think about today and just this year, then suddenly team and the long-term benefits to the client falls away.
Well, we all know that the retail market can fluctuate and it can be turbulent at times all across the globe. Could you give us some of your expert advice as to what the commercial and retail property market is currently doing in the UK?
Well, retail in particular, it's kind of almost in a perfect storm. It's got all sorts of challenges, in particular in the UK, but across the globe. I mean, here we have currency challenges. Those retailers that didn't hedge against currency issues or challenges around Brexit are struggling. Rates have gone up. And in general, there are all sorts of costs. Obviously, the costs of trading within a property, but they have logistics costs that are going through the roof. They have huge costs around building an internet for delivery of products to the house, click and collect, delivering to home. It's just a big challenge. Those retailers that are on top of their game are doing very well. There are many that are still struggling with a few of those, but in general, the margin is for retailers is under pressure. So, and then you come down to locations. It's all about, if it's in bricks and mortar, you've got to get the location right. The UK has hundreds and hundreds of high streets that are not fit for purpose in today's market, and that's going to be a challenge. And I think, again, across the globe, we're finding that landlords and retailers need to come together to work out what is the future of bricks and mortar, together with logistics and the internet shopping, to accept that life has changed quite dramatically. The customers' needs have changed. They're very, very demanding, so they have to react to that. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's one that isn't going away, and we just need to embrace. And where we've got it right here in the UK, for some of the prime city centre high streets or shopping centres, business is still very good.
That's rather interesting. Well, Ciaran, as you know, CBRE is the principal partner of the All Schools Rugby program and official supporter to England Rugby. Why did the company decide to get involved in rugby, particularly at the youth level?
We've always been we've been a partner of the RFU for some time. We think that if we were going to market or advertise our business, we think an awful lot of our customers enjoy and watch rugby. And then I was given an opportunity 3 or 4 years ago to get involved with the All Schools program, which I absolutely jumped at. I guess it wasn't necessarily that it was a rugby theme, albeit we love the values of rugby, and they fit very closely with our own values. But it was about doing the right thing in the community. And I think what the RFU have done over the last 3 or 4 years is exceptional. This is about going to deprived, underprivileged schools and instilling the values of sport, obviously through rugby, into these brilliant, talented children that never had an opportunity to play rugby or indeed some sports. So they've invested money and time. We jumped on it as a partner in that we have offices all the way across the UK where we now have trained our people to both coach, referee, help organise various different events across the country to the benefit of these kids. And I've been to many of these, and I tell you, it's the most rewarding experience when you turn up to some of these really tough, deprived schools. The kids are so excited. They get to design their own kit. Canterbury have sponsored. And then they get brilliant coaches to teach them this sport. And through that, the RFU obviously go on to benefit, because a lot of these kids jump at it and get very excited and then link in with a local club. So for us, it was about giving back to communities across the UK and underprivileged children. And clearly, at the end of all that, we say the same values come into business. And by the way, have you ever considered the world of property? So hopefully, over a long-term period, we'll benefit from that. In fact, we've had 1 or 2 that have joined our apprenticeship scheme, which is a really pleasure to see. But no, I think it was just an opportune moment to get involved with this brilliant scheme that the RFU had produced, and we're delighted being part of it.
It's absolutely fantastic. Finally, Ciaran, how do you feel businesses could get more involved in rugby and the various sports programs, not just as a once-off, but by forming meaningful and sustainable partnerships? Well,
I think it's a two-way, and you said it there. I mean, it's not. We need to find ways that businesses can benefit from rugby and vice versa. And as I say, I think rugby has a real deep culture of values, right? And for us, that's why we're associated with the RFU. I mean, the fact that our people can get involved helps as well. But so I would encourage businesses to recognise that rugby's going in one direction. It's growing and growing. The professionalism is an all-time high. If you get involved with the players, they are in a totally different mindset from my day. and you can get involved to help them day after rugby to come and share their experience of leadership and management and the skills you embrace as a player, bringing them into business. So I'd encourage it.
Ciaran, it's been a massive privilege having you share your experiences and knowledge with us at the Rugby Business Network. Keep up the brilliant work you and your colleagues do at CBRE.
Great, thank you. My pleasure.